went in spelling it out, probably because he wasn't talking to people as smart. I don't know. Ephesians 2, beginning in 19. And again, this is being written to the church. Now, therefore, you are no longer strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and members of the household of God, having been built on the foundation of the apostles and the prophets, Jesus Christ himself being the chief cornerstone, in whom the whole building being fitted together grows into a holy temple in the Lord, in whom you are also being built together for a dwelling place of God in the Spirit. This is us. And it comes all the way back to this concept here of God being the rock. And I don't think we should ever forget these things, that these all tie together. Where Isaiah says or recounts the words of God that there is no other rock, and then we follow it all the way through. We see the confession of Peter, and then we see this eloquent statement by Paul describing us as part of that structure. Okay. Verses 10 through 20 go back to one of Isaiah's favorite topics, and that's dealing with the foolishness of idolatry and idol worship. It's really one solid passage, so we're gonna read the whole thing, and then we'll come back and take a look at a few things. Actually, beginning in verse 9. Those who fashion a graven image are all of them futile, and their precious things are of no profit. Even their own witnesses fail to see or know, so that they will be put to shame. Who has fashioned a god or cast an idol to no profit? Behold, all his companions will be put to shame, for the craftsmen themselves are mere men. Let them all assemble themselves. Let them stand up. Let them tremble. Let them together be put to shame. The man shapes iron into a cutting tool and does his work over the coals, fashioning it with hammers and working it with his strong arm. He also gets hungry and his strength fails. He drinks no water and becomes weary. Another shapes wood. He extends a measuring line. He outlines it with red chalk. He works it with planes and outlines it with a compass and makes it like the form of a man, like the beauty of man, so that it may sit in a house. Surely he cuts cedars for himself and takes a cypress or an oak and raises it for himself among the trees of the forest. He plants a fir and the rain makes it grow. Then it becomes something for a man to burn. So he takes one of them and warms himself. He also makes a fire to bake bread. He also makes a god and worships it. He makes it a graven image and falls down before it. Half of it burns in the fire. Over this half he eats meat as he roasts a roast and is satisfied. He also warms himself and says, "Aha, I am warm. I have seen the fire." But the rest of it he makes into a god, his graven image. He falls down before it and worships. He also prays to it and says, "Deliver me, for thou art my God." They do not know, nor do they understand, for he has smeared over their eyes so they cannot see, and their hearts so they cannot comprehend. And no one recalls, nor is there knowledge or understanding to say, "I have burned half of it in the fire, and also I have baked bread over its coals. I roast meat and eat it. Then I make the rest of it into an abomination. I fall down before a block of wood." He feeds on ashes. A deceived heart has turned him aside, and he cannot deliver himself, nor say, "Is there not a lie in my right hand?" Come. You can just see the sarcasm that Isaiah gets into in part of this. And I tried to convey some of that the way that I read it anyway. Okay. Most of it's pretty straightforward. Isaiah is mocking them for their idolatry. Talks about the blacksmith that makes an axe and ends up worshiping that iron. He makes it for a tool and then makes a graven image. The same with the woodworker. Woodworker, carpenter, yeah. The first one, the axe, is the blacksmith. Yeah, yeah. Then when it gets into the wood, then I said woodworker, carpenter, yeah. Craftsman would be another good word there. But look at the detail that Isaiah uses. You'd almost think that Isaiah did woodworking. by laying out the compass and the chalk and all of this. And he goes into incredible detail with this in his mocking. Okay. And of course, his point is that these are tools. How can a tool be a god? That's really what he's getting down to, is their foolishness. What I did want to take a closer look at, though, was let's take a look at verse 18. Here's this concept we've talked about before, this concept of blindness, figuratively. They do not know, nor do they understand, for he has smeared over their eyes so that they cannot see, and their hearts so they cannot comprehend. The King James uses a little bit different language, but it all reads the same. Ellicott says that, reads this, and of course, obviously, he had to have been, from his time, he had to be working with the King James, because he says, better it should read, their eyes are smeared over, which is the New American Standard and a lot of the newer versions. The state is described as the judicial blindness, and it's remembered that blindness thus inflicted was one of the tortures of Eastern cruelty. So the reference here is Romans 1. And when it says judicial blindness, he's talking about blindness being imposed as a penalty, like with Samson. So that's the language that's being used here. And of course, who's imposing the penalty but God? Romans 1, beginning in 20. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse. For even though they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks, but they became futile in their speculations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools, and exchanged the glory of the incorruptible God for an image in the form of a corruptible man, and of birds and four-footed animals and crawling creatures. That's a direct thought process back to Isaiah's description here of the carpenters and the woodworkers. Therefore God gave them over in the lust of their hearts to impurity, so that their bodies would be dishonored among them. For they exchanged the truth of God for a lie, and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Again, you can see in Paul's words here exactly what Isaiah wrote. I had the rest of the passage copied down here, but I don't think I'm going to read it. You all know the rest of that passage. I will point out something that's interesting, though. Let's pick it back up beginning at verse 28. And just as they did not see fit to acknowledge God any longer, God gave them over to a depraved mind to do those things which are not proper, being filled with all unrighteousness, wickedness, greed, evil, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, malice. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, arrogant, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, without understanding, untrustworthy, unloving, unmerciful. And although they do not know the ordinance of God, that those who practice such things are worthy of death, they not only do the same, but also give hearty approval to those who practice them. I've always found it amazing and interesting, this list. And in and amongst the list, the disobedient to parents is put on the same level with greed and evil. It's not really aimed at kids, but yeah, it's aimed at kids. But it's the same for us. If any of you are still blessed to have your adult parents, this applies to you. So. And yes, I did use that to my sons. Didn't always do any good, but I did do that. All right. Any comments? Yeah.
Well, I would say you should still honor your parents, but Jesus said, and also in Genesis, that for this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. I think it's sort of an Old Testament principle that when the couple leaves the parents, they're not really under their authority any longer.
I think that if we fail to honor our parents, we're just as guilty. Yeah, it's not, and I can remember going into my parents' household, and as soon as I walked in, even as a 55-year-old, my mom or my dad would issue orders. Well, I did them. Can you get me this? Can you get me that? Yeah. So I think all of that plays together. But yeah, you're right. We are to, one of our purposes as parents is to raise our children to be parents, to go out on their own. And I think that's an important part of being a parent. And so, yeah, that all falls together too. So I guess you got, yes, sir.
Also, this part about idolatry and the making of images,
Mm-hmm.
this is what got the Jewish people in trouble.
Oh, yeah, several times.
It was a world of polytheism, okay? And yet now you have these Jewish people who think that everybody's wrong with them, okay?
Yeah.
And so this got them persecuted. And it didn't stop here. It went all the way to the time of Jesus and beyond. And I hate to say it, it goes on today. Because Christians are still supposed to be monotheistic, but not just that, not just one God, but a certain God. Okay, it is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It is not any other God.
Absolutely.
And, right, and it's not just that. It's also we reject anything else that would come before Him.
Yep.
Okay? And this would cause us trouble with the world with us, because we say, well, no, you got to be inclusive, you know. And then the Christians are saying, no, I don't need to be inclusive. I need to be exclusive. Okay? And we do that because of stuff like this.
Mm-hmm.
Right here. Okay? We don't go around saying, you know, okay, I guess there's other gods too if we want there to believe that. You know, we say, no, there are no other gods.
Right.
This is why the Christian never says Allah Akbar, okay? Because Allah is not God.
No.
You know, and they say, well, Allah just means God. No, it doesn't. Okay? Allah is not God. It's not a generic term. It means the God of the Quran.
Yep.
It's God, right? So we reject anything like that. We say Jesus is Lord.
Yep.
Period.
Yep.
And I get in trouble. So be it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, the whole chapter is mainly about man's stupidity, right?
Yeah.
It's man's stupid. Like, you have God, but yet you worship these dumb things. But it's funny here, like, in the sarcasm he's making, it's almost like the non-holiness of what you worship. The blacksmith is using the same fire to cast an image of something, but yet you're cooking a meal with the same fire. You know, and
Yeah.
echoing in the back of my head, you can't, not think of Jesus' words of unleavened bread to eat me, you never get hungry again, like that. You're worshiping these idols that you're using the fire to make them with, to make your food, and you're constantly doing that, you're always hungry, and you're never filled.
Yeah.
Yet Jesus is that, living bread to eat, you never get hungry again.
Yeah. Of course, they wouldn't have known about Christ, but yeah, Isaiah is really hammering him. And it's not the first time, and it wasn't the last time. And given how the world celebrates today, I'm trying real hard not to head down that path, because this is a perfect segue to head down that path. And so just for anybody that may be tuning in outside of this room, I'm going to stay away from it. But yeah, I got about a dozen things running through my head right now.
Verse 20 actually says it. It says that they are so deceived that they cannot even admit that in their right hand is a lie. They can't even admit it. They know it's a block of wood, but they can't admit it, that it's a lie. And it's right there. Nor can they say, is there not a lie in my right hand? Right in front of your face, you still are so deceived you can't even admit that that block of wood is not God.
Yeah. Well, look what
It goes on today.
I was actually thinking the other direction. Moses' brother, Aaron. Look what Aaron did while Moses was up on the mountain talking to God.
I think that man needs a seat. I mean, I'm not saying I agree with what he's doing, right? It's the same thing with Thomas. When we make fun of Thomas, and he's like, I ain't believing that Jesus does see the hole in his hand, right? Whatever. Say whatever you want. I would be the exact same way. I'm not even alive. But yet I believe and I have faith now, and I haven't seen Jesus. I've never met him, never seen him. I know he's there, and I know I can see him in everything, creation, all that kind of stuff. I get it. But same thing too. That
Well, I think what we also need to remember is that history and tradition tells us that Thomas also died a martyr's death. So, yeah.
No, I'm saying like
Yeah.
I would be the first, I'd be just like Tom. Hey, let me see. I gotta set that.
Yeah, but to your point, Bobby, is that Thomas needed to see that, but that was what he took with him in building his faith.
Blessed are those,
Yeah.
right, but blessed are those more who have not. Remember, many people died
Yeah.
for their faith who never saw Jesus.
That's right.
So, and I don't want to pick on Thomas, but he's got a reason for that title,
Yeah.
Doubting Thomas, because it took that plus all the stuff that he saw before to finally convince him. Yet there are people who have never even seen a supernatural event in their life, but have died for their faith.
Yep.
That's the ones that are truly blessed.
And we could take it further than that. We could talk about Peter, and Peter being right there with Christ and drew a sword, not understanding. We could talk about Paul being a Pharisee of Pharisees and knowing the Old Testament top to bottom, and still not seeing Christ until he gets slapped upside the head on the road to Damascus. So yeah, we pick on Thomas and we give him that name, but are these other guys, or are we that much different?
Disciples are powered and movement to the Spirit came upon them and they got out of
Yeah. But we never got to walk with Christ while he was here on earth, but we get to walk with him now. So, it's a tough judgment. What did I want to get into on oh, we got time for one more thought process. Verse 21 brings back this same thought of formed in the womb. Remember these things, O Jacob, and Israel, you are my servant. I have formed you. You are my servant, O Israel. You will not be forgotten of me. It's the same thought process that he had in verse 2. This concept, if you look at it, though, this is in direct contrast to what you see before, with Isaiah mocking them over their idolatry, and then coming right back to this contrasting God that formed them in the same way that they formed the wood images and they formed the iron images. It's that same language, and it's God telling them that God did that for them. So I thought the contrast there was interesting, in the way that Isaiah sums up his assault. And the last of that passage, the last part of 21, you will not be forgotten by me, interestingly is where did I see just here? Is a relatively abnormal use of a passive verb. You don't see, the language is not direct, I will remember you. By contrast, it's you will not be forgotten by me. And that's what they talk about, the use of this passive verb. So.
It's kind of the same terminology used with Joshua. Be strong, be courageous, I will be with you wherever you go.
Yeah.
I will be with you.
Yeah. Yes, it is the same thought process, but that you notice the difference in the verbs. I will be with you. I will remember you. You will not be forgotten by me. So it's just a different grammatical use, and it's a relatively abnormal use of that kind of verb. So. All right. We will not get through the next thought in the rest of the chapter, so I'm going to go ahead and stop there. Does anybody have any last comments? Tim, would you close?
Lord, we thank you that we can come to your word and study it and help it to be upon our hearts, help us to live it out, and learn here. Help us to have a blessed day. We thank you that you gave us your son. Thank you, Jesus, for dying on the cross for us.
Amen. Thank you all very much.